So, welcome everyone to our first panel for today, and good morning or good afternoon. So, our panel discussion is titled "Preparing the Next Generation of Leaders: Upskilling, Reskilling, Training, and Retraining." So, I'd like to welcome you all, and first, let me welcome our wonderful speakers in this panel. Mr. Anand Chopra-McGowan, General Manager, Emeritus, London, UK. Hi, Anand. Mr. Nafez Dakkak, Chairman at Adjunct and CEO, Queen Rania Foundation, London, UK. And Dr. Abdulaziz Almalik, General Director for Research and Innovation Support at KACST, King Abdulaziz City for Science and Technology, KSA. Hi, Nafez. Hi, Dr. Abdulaziz. So first, hello. So first, let me talk a little bit briefly about our speakers. So Anand is the General Manager, UK and Europe for Emeritus, a fast-growing edtech company that partners with the world's best universities to make professional education accessible and affordable. And prior to that, he was part of the founding team of General Assembly, which was acquired by the Adjunct Group for $400 million. Anand has been published in leading business journals and like Harvard Business Review and First Round Review. He grew up in India. Hi, Anand. And he attended university and worked in the US and currently lives and works in London. So hi, all the way to London.
Hello.
Hello. Mr. Nafez Dakkak is the CEO of the Queen Rania Foundation's London office, where he oversees the foundation's strategic partnerships and talent development. He also leads the foundation's engagement with the education entrepreneurship sector across MENA and globally. Prior to this role, Nafez founded Adjunct.org, the largest Arabic online education portal that reaches over 4.5 million learners across the MENA region, where he is now the executive chairman. An initiative of the Queen Rania Foundation, Adjunct focuses on the upskilling and reskilling of Arabic-speaking learners that come from all across the region and include disadvantaged youth in Gaza, Syria, and Iraq. He is currently pursuing a part-time master's degree in educational neuroscience at Harvard's Graduate School of Education. Hi, Nafez.
Laila.
Hello. We are honored to have Dr. Abdulaziz Al-Malik, the Director General for Scientific Research and Innovation Support at King Abdulaziz City for Science and Technology, KACST, in Saudi Arabia since 2019, the Chairman of the National Committee of Bioethics since 2019, a member of the Board of Directors of the Saudi Institute of Health Research since 2020, the Director of Life Sciences and Environment Research Institute at KACST from 2015 till now, a member of the Steering Committee of the Science Group that represents the scientific community of G20, a member of the Advisory Committee of the Health Research Program, Health Transformation Program, and the Model of Care, as of 2021, and has worked on RDI, strategy development and execution of a plethora of national R&D programs. Dr. Al-Malik is an associate research professor of pharmaceutical sciences. He received his PhD degree in pharmaceutical sciences from the University of Manchester 2013. His MSc with merit in clinical pharmacology from the University of Glasgow in 2008, and his Bachelor of Pharmaceutical Sciences from King Saud University in 2005. To date, he has published over 40 research papers. Wow. Is the holder of 2 patents and has many pending. Hi, Dr. Abdulaziz. Welcome. And myself, Laila Ziko, I'm very happy to join as the moderator. So, having said that, let's start with our panel, and we will have like a round of answers from our esteemed speakers, Anand and Nafez, then following that, Dr. Abdulaziz. Let me first start by asking, so concerning upskilling, we're talking about reskilling, training, and retraining. So from your perspective, for example, Anand in the edtech, Nafez in the educational entrepreneurship, Dr. Abdulaziz in academia and research, what do you foresee in the near future for the new generation of leaders in the MENA region, Middle East, North Africa.
Hello, assalamu alaikum, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here, and thank you for having me. So thanks for the question. I think I can get started by saying that the good news is that the MENA workforce is very optimistic about the future. And I think the most important thing is that there is a general agreement among workers and leaders that they will need to build skills for the future. They will need to upskill, they will need to reskill. However, there is a disconnect currently between leaders of and employers of large organizations and their people. So let me bring some data to actually sort of illustrate this. So recently, PwC conducted a survey of about thousands of leaders, CEOs, but then also employees of companies. And what they found is that 7 out of 10 CEOs in the MENA region believe that they have made significant progress on upskilling and building new skills for their employees and for their workers. However, when they surveyed the employees themselves, they found that only 23% of employees believe that they have, or say that they have actually gotten some kind of upskilling at work. And so what you're finding is there's this disconnect between what leaders are thinking and what the individual employees are saying. So I think a big thing that people need to be able to focus on is finding better ways to be able to connect between leaders and workers at companies and being able to determine what the actual skill needs are. But again, I'll end with the good news, which is that there is a general agreement that there are going to need to be skills built for the future, that companies, governments, and educational institutions have a role to play here, and that the mindset that everyone is bringing is that education does not stop at the academic level. It does not stop when you finish your secondary education or your university, but it truly is a lifelong pursuit. And so now the work that we have to do, and we'll hear from our colleagues on this panel, the work that we have to do is to build this infrastructure for lifelong learning so that the access and the experience of being able to learn skills throughout people's working environment and working experience is present. And so that's the work that we all have to do now.
Thank you so much, Anand. Nafez, do you like to say your insight from your?
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, I think to really build on what Anand is saying, I think as any leader coming into the space, there are 2 important things I think you need to do. The first is, focus on sort of your learning muscles, your learning ability, really sort of becoming an quote unquote expert learner. What does it take to continue to upskill and reskill yourself in your field? Because I really think you need to lead by example. And if you're going to do that, this is going to be an integral part of your arsenal. The second 2 components of this are, one, it's becoming more and more clear, if it wasn't before, that talent is the cornerstone of any. It's not we used to talk about the capitalist dilemma, before that the innovator's dilemma. I think right now is the HR sort of L&D person's dilemma. Where do I find the people I need, and how do I upskill those people appropriately? So I think bringing HR and L&D closer into that sort of C-suite, or sort of what I think McKinsey in the past had called the C3, which is the CEO, the CFO, and the CHRO, and empowering those CHROs to make decisions that are at a strategic level is going to be very, very important. And the last thing, this is one of the things that we work with at Dakkak, and there are others in the region as well, of course, that do that, is ensuring that your team has that infrastructure that Anand touched on to, just-in-time training, to upskill and regularly monitor their learning and development, and for your HR people to have the right tools to measure the ROI on any investments you're making in learning and development. So I think those 3, the mindset, bringing the CHRO into the C-suite much more closely, or creating a CHRO position, which doesn't exist in a lot of organizations in the Middle East, and then investing in both the hard and soft infrastructure to make sure that you have a learning organization that's able to constantly upskill and reskill your team.
Thank you so much, Nafez. Dr. Abdulaziz, if you'd like to elaborate from your point of view.
Thank you, Laila. And I echo with my colleagues here. First of all, thank you for having me, and I'm really glad to be here among this esteemed panel members. I think it's hard to discuss the future of the new generation of leaders out of the context of COVID-19 anymore. So it will definitely shape the future of the workforce in the MENA region and beyond for years to come. So the pandemic disrupted labor markets. The short-term consequences were sudden and often severe. Millions lost their jobs, and others rapidly adjusted to working from home as offices closed around the globe. Interestingly, however, we noticed millions of job openings around the globe, despite near-record unemployment rates. So these unfilled positions are, in my opinion, indicators to an ever-widening skills gap caused by factors from improperly prepared job seekers and a lack of on-the-job training to match employer expectations. So the pandemic supercharged the trends, driving the evolving skill requirements of today's workplace. So technology skills, digital fluency rank as some of the most important competencies for years to come. In fact, employers seeking software engineers, for example, data analysts, and so on, will face a challenge acquiring the needed talent. So we could see organizations across the regions grappling with how to close the skills gap before it's too late. This will be a massive undertaking, and according to the World Economic Forum, it's predicted that many workers will require up to 6 months of reskilling by 2025. Interestingly, however, MENA governments and institutions in particular, those who invested in transforming their economies to better adapt to future change, exhibited extraordinary flexibility and adaptability in responding to the pandemic and retooled their workforce in ways that point to a better future. As a Saudi Arabian, I would like to highlight my country's experience in this. So back in 2017, and as a part of the country's vision for the future, Vision 2030, the Saudi Arabian government deployed an ambitious plan aiming to be a world leader in digital transformation. And the transformation was monumental. The program improved digital infrastructure, providing more than 3.5 million houses with access to fiber optics networks, and a host of other infrastructure-related improvements. This investment played a vital role in preparing the country for effectively mitigate COVID crisis and cope with its impact on people's life and national workforce. Teachers could teach from home, medical doctors could virtually meet their patients, public and private workforce could easily provide their services entirely through electronic means. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Abdulaziz and Anand, Nafez. So let me say something to our wonderful audience. Please, guys, everybody, may actually send us any of your questions or all of your questions, and we will address them in the last quarter of the panel. So please go ahead and send your questions. We will take them at the end. And for our second question, so from your opinion, Anand, Nafez, Dr. Abdulaziz, each in their unique field. So is there definitely, I was going to say there is a change, but what do you see like major changes, minor changes, specifically in the required skills for future leaders in the workplace, especially like Dr. Abdulaziz mentioned, in light of the post-COVID days that we are living? So if you may please go ahead, Anand.
I'm very happy to. Thanks for the question. I mean, as we just heard from Dr. Abdulaziz, there really, you can't have this conversation without talking about the impact of COVID-19. I think there's definitely been profound changes in the way that leaders, workers, all of us have to adapt. So I will also say that some of the things that we're seeing are simply accelerations of existing trends that were already taking place even before the pandemic. But so I can again bring an example to illustrate this. At my company, Emeritus, we've recently launched a new course that is actually focused on this topic. It's called Building Resiliency Across the Workforce, and it's specifically around what it means to be a leader and a growing leader, an aspiring leader in a post-pandemic world of work. We built it in partnership with Cornell University in the US, and we're currently actually running it in Saudi Arabia for Saudi Aramco with 700 of their leaders. And you know, there's a lot of things that I can share about the details of this, but at a high level, in researching the curriculum development, we came up with 4 key areas that are critical for leaders to be thinking about as they adapt to leading in the post-COVID world. So the first is that stress levels and anxiety levels for people are really high right now, and the continuing uncertainty means that is something that we really have to start thinking about as leaders, and leaders need to build new ways to manage this. The second is that leaders need to be aware of the idea of resilience and build tools to become more resilient and think about what that means in the context of their roles. That's an important skill that in many ways actually goes, you know, entirely back to childhood and the idea of grit and tenacity and the kinds of things that people need to build as, you know, some call them soft skills. I prefer to call them power skills. You know, this really important sort of way of working and thinking that's so critical. But then third, we also found that it's important for leaders to recognize that in crisis, and we heard a little bit about this from Dr. Abdulaziz about the difference in jobs that are going away but coming up as well. In a crisis, there's often opportunity as well. And so leaders need to heighten and strengthen their skills around innovation. So that's the third one that we found. And then fourth, and I think this is really important, as we all, you know, are coming at this conference and this event from all over the world, you know, as we think about social capital and the need for trust and relationships and ways of working between teams that will increasingly be distributed across borders and across time zones. We need to think differently about the way in which we build trust and the way in which we build relationships and work on things. So these are, again, many of these are things that leaders have always needed to work on, right? I mean, building social networks, building innovation skills. These are all things that people have needed to work on forever. But I think the pandemic has enhanced and adjusted some of these in a way that is really important for everyone who wants to become a leader or is already a leader to spend some focused time on thinking about how, against these 4 areas, it really adjusts the way that they think and act today. So that's our perspective or thoughts, having spent a good amount of time sort of researching this topic over the last few months. But curious to hear from Nafez and Dr. Abdulaziz what their thoughts.
Thank you. Nafez, we would love to hear your input on this.
Thank you, Laila, and thank you, Anand, for that. I think fantastic answer. Really, what I'd love to do is just drill on to that last point. I think for us, the one thing that has become very, very clear is trust is going to be very, very important going forward, and especially at the beginning of the pandemic. You know, it's cultures with high trust that, you know, were able to quickly pivot to, you know, working remotely, even if they didn't have all the required infrastructure, because you trusted your employees, your staff, to really get there and get the job done. And this kind of ties, you know, to the initial sort of discussion we were having really about reskilling and upskilling. I mean, I want to talk about, you know, it's really important that we as leaders start thinking about, you know, how do we engender trust and how do we create trust? And if you think of trust, you know, trust is, you know, 2 components on a very basic level. You know, it's integrity. Are we aligned on the same mission? Do we share the same values? And it's also capacity and capability. Because, you know, I might think, you know, you're really good at doing this, but I don't, you know, think we're aligned on sort of the purpose where we're going, or I'm aligned and we're aligned on where we're going and where we need to get to, but I don't trust your capability and capacity. I think lapses in capability and capacity are sort of easier to remedy, easier to overcome. And it's, I mean, what we're learning with, you know, given that the half-life of knowledge is decreasing, is something that we will constantly need to do. You're always going to need to reskill your people. So I think what COVID-19 has made really, really clear, and is how we create that trust, how we engender that trust, is really, really important. To make this more concrete, I think it comes down to two basic things that leaders and their HR teams need to do really, really well. We need to start thinking very clearly about what kind of culture we're trying to create, and culture needs to hurt. It's not just some nice values that we put up on the wall. We do like a nice promotional video that we pay somebody to do. It's, are we hiring, rewarding, and incentivizing people on the values we've created? So if we say openness is a value, and we realize that managers aren't very open with their staff, then that doesn't really create that kind of trust. And then the second part is hiring and bringing on the right people on the bus, and helping people transition out when the fit is no longer the right fit for them. And I think that's something that, one, we need to do better, because we need to create these high trust environments. But obviously, we're hearing all these stories of colleagues, family, and friends that starting a job completely online, and only now cohabiting the same physical space and meeting their colleagues for the first time. So yeah, I would just really drill on that last point that Anand talked about in terms of social capital, trust, and how do we create those high trust environments are going to be really, really important going forward. And again, because we're realizing people can be more productive sometimes working remotely, or at least working more flexibly. Because another important point that Anand touched on is this whole stress level. People that are working from home are actually putting in, we know from the data, more hours and sometimes more stressed than they were when they were working in the office, because that ability to separate between home and work has become a lot more difficult. So again, having that high trust environment and the right culture helps people deal with that stress better. That's my 2 cents.
Great, thank you so much, Nafez. That's very exciting. And Dr. Abdulaziz, we would very much like to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, thank you. It's really hard to be the last to share, but I hope the audience doesn't see this as a redundant. But again, I echo with my friends here. I think a number of levels of response will be interesting for this. The social and economic crisis caused by the COVID-19 pandemic is an extreme for sure, but relevant example of the types of challenges we face today. And we all witnessed the rise and fall of public and private leaders across the globe as a result of their management of COVID crisis. So in my opinion, crisis management skills should be at the top of the list for future leaders to master. It requires leadership skills that might be perceived as an overly directive one leader kind of show during business as usual. But in times of uncertainty, however, quick decisions are essential, and these exceptional circumstances call for a more human-centric and radically driven leadership skills and style. So leaders also must develop their critical thinking skills and decision-making skills, while ensuring to be pragmatic at the same time. Limiting the crisis damage is a priority and calls for a pragmatic approach to achieve quick results, in addition to be flexible enough to adapt to the situation as it evolves. Also, having the courage to decide on imperfect, inconsistent information is critical. Leaders now, they know that they need to make good, fast decisions under the best of circumstances. But the trickiest part here is taking high-stake decisions during times of crisis. So the typical approach of many organizations, big and small, will be far too slow to keep up in such turbulence, and postponing decisions to wait for more information might make sense during business as usual. But when the environment is uncertain and defined by urgency and imperfect information, waiting to decide is a decision in itself. So by acting differently, meaning being flexible and adaptable, leaders will ensure the survival of their organizations, and which call for courageous, confident, and sometimes unpopular moves. So leaders must take the lead as stabilizing the organizations requires for ownership and strong guidance. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Aziz. We have started talking about many different and exciting points. So coming to our last question in the panel, and then we will take questions. Please go ahead, our audience, and send us your questions. We will address them. So if each one of us in the speakers, Anand, Nafez, and Dr. Abdulaziz, is working in a particular field. We have EdTech, educational entrepreneurship, and academia and research. So what particular advice would you give to a new leader in your unique field in light of the current challenges? If you have a specific tip, advice you'd like to share with us. And Anand, we could go again.
Yeah, sure. Very, very happy to. I mean, I would actually echo one of the points that Dr. Abdulaziz just made about critical thinking, and specifically the ability to work with imperfect information and make decisions with that. So in my field, which is ed tech, education technology. This is a very, very fast growing field, because of many of the infrastructural changes that we heard about earlier from Dr. Abdulaziz as well around, improving internet connectivity all around the world, lots of investments being made. And then the COVID-19 pandemic, meaning that everyone is now much more comfortable with having experiences like this, where, we are collaborating and learning and sharing in a virtual setting. It's meant that the access and demand for various types of online learning is huge. So what that means is that for somebody to succeed in this space, there's still a lot of uncertainty about where the future goes, and where to invest and how to prioritize and things like that. So thinking through those kinds of decisions and working with imperfect information is a critical skill that leaders need to build. There are some broader things, though, as well, that I think are not necessarily unique to the ed tech field, but certainly are applicable. And this is based on, again, some recent research. In this case, a firm called Gartner that does a lot of research in the corporate space. They've surveyed 3,000 managers, so sort of mid-level managers, emerging leaders. And they found that there's a number of trends that managers now need to think about around the way in which they work, and lots of things that are sort of driving this. Remote work is now normal, and people are willing to and ready to do that. That means that managers will have less visibility into the way that their teams are working. More companies are using technology to manage their workers, and this is everything from AI-driven scheduling software all the way to automated feedback tools for employees as well. And then also you're finding that employees themselves have changing expectations about what they want in their employer. So if you're a leader in this space, your team members are now likely expecting that they can work from anywhere, that they can have more autonomy, they can have a better, because of the increase in stress levels, you're now finding more priority in thinking about the ways in which work and life are balanced. So as a leader, you now need to think about how you can accommodate all of these different things. And I think the critical skill for leaders to really build, and again, this has been important forever, but is now even more important, is the skill of empathy, and really being able to understand the situation in which your employees find themselves, more connected, but more surveilled, more independent, but more remote. It's really important to think about these scenarios in which they find themselves, and adjust your leadership style appropriately. So it's a tough but exciting time to be a leader, and there's a lot of profound change that's happening, and I think we're only just at the beginning of some of these. So that's some of the perspective that I can share from the ed tech space, but I think more broadly applicable as well.
Thank you, Anand. So let's mix things up based on our request. So please, Dr. Abdulaziz, there you go. We'll shuffle a bit. If you like to share your insight on the advice to new leaders, then we go to Nafez. So Dr. Abdulaziz, if you like to give a particular advice for leaders in your field or other fields in light of COVID.
Thank you, Laila, and apologies for Nafez. Well, as a research scientist, I believe that the understanding of the importance of scientific cooperation and collaboration, as well as capitalizing on it, would be my first advice to new leaders in science. One of the positive things about the pandemic, few actually positive things about it, is having science and scientists in the spotlight. The speed and volume of discovery over the past year have been remarkable, from unraveling the molecular details of the virus to understanding how it spreads and who is most at risk, and inventing tests, drugs, vaccines, and what have you. All of this would not have happened without international and intercontinental even collaboration. So this has emphasized the importance of open access to scientific knowledge and know-how, data sharing, and evidence-based policy and decision-making. The second advice, I would say, is understanding the power of science communication. Science communication has emerged as a powerful tool for managing public health. In the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, for example, science communication played a vital role in public health response to COVID-19. The national response was well supported by the Ministry of Health. It houses a science communication department and serving to bridge between researchers and the public realm to promote science and science perception and understanding. So we focused during the pandemic on helping the public to understand the risks they are exposed to, and to avoid and navigate through COVID-19 while getting on with their lives. So emphasizing transparency and openness, science communication campaigns will definitely help to ensure all part of the society are safe and well. I remembered my just a quick insight on that. As a scientist, I was overwhelmed with questions from family, friends, and others about what are the differences between messenger RNA vaccines, for example, and adenoviral vaccines, or what are the differences between Moderna vaccine and Pfizer vaccines. And this actually, so mastering the science communication skills and how could we communicate science efficiently to non-specialists is really a critical skill for the future.
Thank you so much. And Nafez?
Yeah, I mean, I know we're running out of time, and I'll be quick, but I think the last point that Dr. Abdulaziz, I think you need to give us a session on this because we get so many questions. I'm also now wondering, I took Sinopharm, can I take Pfizer? And people are asking, so we definitely need more communication on this. I think on that last note, and to be very quick, I think if you're in educational entrepreneurship, obviously COVID is top of your agenda, and I think maybe there are 3 things for you to think about with COVID. On the plus side, it's definitely created more awareness, and I'd say, for the people we work with, we interact with in the MENA region, it's no longer a question, do we need technology? Do we need sort of more innovation and education? I mean, people are, in terms of product awareness, there's creating a lot more inbound traffic. But at the same time, I think as an educational entrepreneur to think about is 2 other questions. One is, this has pulled a lot of demand forward. What does this mean? Has the awareness created more demand in the future? And again, that'll be highly relevant to sort of your sector and your space. And the last, and I think not the most important one, specifically when you talk about entrepreneurial education in the classroom, to keep in mind that this was an emergency response to a pandemic. which means that probably one of the most important aspects of any change management program, which is upskilling, training for teachers to bring this back to reskilling, upskilling, has not been done enough. And I think, teachers have been incredibly important this year. They've gone through a lot. And I think for a lot of us that have kids, we've also come to appreciate just how much work our teachers do. So to keep that all in perspective. And I think we're very much out of time, so I'm happy to leave it there.
Yes, but I hope I will ask the organizers if I can take just a few minutes for the questions. So we have a question. As a CEO of a startup in UAE, this is his question. He really cares about upskilling his team, but his budget is very limited. He needs to ask Anand. Our budget is limited, and as much as I want to help them grow, I am tied to the budget. So my question is to Anand, where could be a good place to start?
Question, and there are lots of people who are dealing with the same concern, right? A need and a desire to invest in your team, but a limited budget and even time with which to do so. The good news again is that, and I think Nafez will know something about this as well. There are now lots and lots of resources available for very little amounts of money and even for free to help with beginning the upskilling journey. And so I point to lots of different platforms you can go to. You can go to Adjunct for sure. You can go to Coursera. You can go to LinkedIn Learning. You can come to us for my company Emeritus is there is some investment. The question becomes, what really is the outcome that you're looking for, and how do you control for quality? So our model has been to control for quality by partnering with universities, and we partner with top tier universities, and so that there's a check of quality there based on that. But there's lots of other ways to do so as well. You can look at the popularity of courses. You can look at the outcomes that people report after they've taken that course, and so I think, in many cases, organizations that are struggling with funding for education, that oftentimes the work to be done before you have the funding question is to understand what outcome you're aiming for. And then if you can prove that the outcome is achieved, then oftentimes it's easier to allocate funds for education. So that would be the advice that I would give. First define what kind of outcome you're looking for, and then you can find many sources for this. There's the good news again is that the lowering cost of distribution and everything being happening, or many more things happening in a virtual setting, mean that content and the learning experience itself is much more affordable than it once was.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Anand. And a question maybe to Nafez. So what new innovative ways of funding or models are you seeing to help the next generation fund their lifelong learning and employability journey?
I think it really depends on maybe sort of the geography you're in, how much the public sector is playing a role. Maybe in more advanced economies, and I'd say certainly in the GCC, there's a lot of that support. To Anand's previous point, I think in maybe less well-off countries, platforms like Idrak, I mean, we try to, we do a lot of reskilling and upskilling. All our courses are for free. And now we do actually even have a program that supports corporates and, provides you with the right dashboards to measure learning outcomes. If anybody wants to check out, idrak.pro or Idrak Pro. So we do some of that. But I think a lot of this really needs to be about project-based learning. And my advice for people that are trying to upskill and reskill, to make sure that they have a platform where they're sharing and talking more about their learning journey, because then with platforms like Twitter and others, you can really get access to great, I'd say, networks of knowledge and mentorship. And the last one, to my earlier point, is to really work on sort of projects and endpoints and outcomes that you can share sort of more broadly and get feedback on. I think with the time, it's maybe too general of a question to answer very helpfully, but I'm happy to also take this offline.
Thank you, Nafez. And Dr. Abdulaziz, I'm so sorry, but so there's a question. It's a deep question, and we are running out of time. But the question is, what is the role of the government in upskilling and reskilling the private sector? If you can give him like highlights or...
Well, it's,
high-level advice?
indeed, it's a deep question, but well, it depends on the sector, the private sector play in, but generally, the government usually they can make the life of the private sector easier by just clearing the path for them. And if the private sector know the destination, the private sector is very dynamic. Will equip its talent to be able to reach that destination, because usually, especially in our region, the government guide and lead the economy. So that's one thing. The other thing is that, well, from a holistic point of view, Ingabis for Science and Technology, for example, as a national lab, we provide programs for the private sector engineers and MBAs and what have you for upskilling through our academy and through knowledge exchange mechanisms that we have. And I know that the time is of essence.
Yes, they are asking me. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Abdulaziz Almalik, Anand, and Nafez.